Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Power Driven Podcast. Today, we're going to answer probably the most commonly asked question we get here at Power Driven Diesel, which is how do I make 500 horsepower with my truck? 500 to 600 horsepower.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to go over all of, today we're going to start with the Dodge platform. So we're going to start with the first gen Cummins, then we're going to go to the 12 valve, the VP24 valve, the 03 to 07 common rail. If we have time, we will even get to the 07 and up, the emissions no-no trucks.
Yeah. It's a great idea. Talk about emissions no-no trucks. That's brilliant.
If we have time.
Right. If we have time. So anyway, so we do get this question a lot. Like people call in, hey, I just want 500 horsepower. We do a lot of videos making much power, more power than that. But honestly, on the street and most people, that's not what they're after. They need to be able to tow their trailers, tow their boats, horses, campers, whatever it is. And when you start getting big power, they kind of lose that ability to do that reliably. My truck's a great example of that.
Yeah, no, once you get over 500, no one needs more than 500, but 500 is such a great number. It's so capable. You don't really start ruining the truck. It's super reliable if done right.
Like, it's a great
fun
number.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's great.
Yeah,
fun.
it's a good. I'm talking 500 horsepower to the ground, probably around 1,000 foot-pounds of torque to the ground, not at the crank, to the ground. So, a fair bit more than a brand new truck would have.
So starting with the first gen, they made 160 horsepower to the crank. Generally on our dyno, 130 to the tire is a pretty 120, 130. That's most of them fall in that range. So we're going to talk about adding 370 horsepower.
Yeah. Which wouldn't be hard if they had a decent pump on them. Now there's definitely people who love the VE pump, and I'm not going to hate on the VE pump. There definitely has some cool things about them, but big power is not their specialty.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to get this out of the way right away. Any of these trucks, if you find a way to just max the fueling and spray them, you can spray all of them to 500 horsepower. We're not talking about one quick rip on the dyno, ghetto fog it, where they don't even have a nitrous kit. Somebody stands in front of the helmet on and sprays a bottle in the air filter. We're talking real power here.
I'm really glad you said that because I really thought you were just going to say like, do this and spray it. I was going to nix that. I was like, okay, we know you could spray them all to 500. So I thought you were going to be the culprit, not the solution there. I'm very proud.
I do think we should have like two criteria though. Cause making 500 horsepower is one thing, not like a spray and pray, but like a good running truck, a daily driver truck. And you can hit a dyno, hit 500 horsepower. And there's another category of like, I'm going to use 500 horsepower towing my trailer up a grade, and I want 500 horsepower up that grade. Those are kind of two different things. Like just because you make 500 horsepower with your truck, I wouldn't say it means you can use 500 horsepower going up the grade. So we need to discuss kind of like, how do you do it both ways? Because those are two very different builds.
So maybe like a hot street 500 and a towing 500.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm going to say like on a second gen, the radiators aren't even hardly big enough to cool 500. Like you have to have a pretty, solid setup in order to be able to put down 500 and cool down 500 pulling grades and stuff.
Well, if you were below sea level in like Alaska in the dead of winter, you'll have enough cooling. Okay. So pretend like we're towing with 500 horsepower below sea level in, minus 20 Fahrenheit.
Okay, cool. Thanks for clearing that up.
Well, yeah, it is true. They are limited there. Everything's limited there. You got to realize, these semi trucks are rated at 400 horsepower at the crank, and look at the radiators on those things. And so, are you gonna have to pull a super long grade at 500 horsepower? Maybe not. But if you have a hill or something, kind of a steep hill, that's going to be like a 2-minute hill or something or less, or a minute hill. You probably get through that pretty good. It just depends. A lot of things, but that's a criteria. That's what we're saying. Engine mods, transmission mods, whatever you need. And I don't like say even coolant mods on the second gen, it's going to be very difficult. But back to your first gen, is this even possible?
So back to the first gen. So we did a double the horsepower and we got into the mid 330 horsepower range. And it quickly became apparent if you want 500 fuel only, you either need to get a radical aftermarket pump with like big pump elements and a big cam, which in my opinion is not proven reliable for a long time on the street. Now, some of the first gen guys out there are going to be like, oh yeah, the Ratman pump or whatever. Your sample size is too small for me. I'm not saying the pump isn't reliable, but I'm just saying mainstream hasn't really, there's not thousands of people out there with 14 millimeter cam plates and on these VE pumps. So to me, if you want 500, your first step, you really need to do a P pump swap. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you've got the 12 valve. Might as well do the cool part of the 12 valve, which is a P pump. So if you're gonna tow and have 500 horsepower or make it reliably. You know, like Will says, the P pump's kind of your option, which kind of makes us skip right to the second gens.
Yeah.
Because anything second gen is going to apply to your first gen and your P pump swap.
Now there are a few first gen listeners out there, and they're very loud in the comment section. So let me give you some tips to get to 400 horsepower with the VE pump, which I think is doable. You're going to need the pump maxed out, the VE pump. You're going to need a governor spring in there. So these are things you can do at home. If you like to turn up the fuel screw and play with runaway, a lot of guys just opt for a new fresh pump that's been, max calibrated, in a pump shop. We sell, maxed out pumps there, but basically you need the governor spring to get the RPMs up. You need the pump turned up. You're going to need bigger injectors. First gens respond really well to large injectors. That VE pump, they like bigger injectors than a P pump when you're trying to get big power out of them. So, I mean, I'd be trying to get a 400. You're basically maxed out. You're talking the biggest power jet, the stage 3s, if you had budget, but honestly, the 5x20s, 5x18s, I mean, you're talking big injectors, smoky, nasty mess. You're going to need some timing in there. You're probably going to need more than just racking the pump over to the head. You're going to need to skip a tooth. You need to get up in that 30-degree timing range, which you can't do unless you unbolt. Well, if you're putting a new pump on, that's fine, but you got to skip a tooth. Then valve springs, you're going to turn some RPM, factory valve springs. Although you can float the valves a little bit and they don't usually kiss, you'll make more power if you have valve train control.
Yeah.
So, 60-pound valve springs, but really if I was going for 500 or 400 maxes out, I go right to a street conical valve spring. You're going to need to hold the head down. You probably, with all that timing, you're probably going to need O-rings. So the head probably needs to come off and get O-ringed. And you're going to go back with head studs so you can hold that down. So you basically need to fasten the head down. You need O-rings. You need valve springs. You need either an aftermarket turned up pump. You need bigger injectors. And then on the turbo side, where do you think you'd go for 500 horse on turbo?
I don't even know on a first gen. I mean, the 6064 drop-in works really well on a P pump. If you're fuel limited, you really need all the air you can possibly get to go super lean and get every ounce of fuel burned. So I don't know do you need compounds to get that kind of power on a first gen? Can you do it on it? Or maybe one of our new Aggressor 62-9s or 67-9s? Because you get that tight.
Yeah, the HE351 based ones, that seems to be what those guys are making the most with a single. Yeah. Seems like with the big aftermarket pumps, I'm not talking what I consider the straightable ones, they're in that 500 range. And then with compounds, they're making over 600. So to me, you probably need compounds. I mean, not to 400. I don't know. You probably should go right to compound turbos, honestly, if you're going to. The hot street, let's say the 67, HE351 based. And then for towing, you're going to want compound turbos on there at 400 horse.
So maybe drop down to 60 and get like a 476 or something. What do you think, Meyer? You're kind of a turbo guy.
So I was going to say it really depends on what you're trying to do with it. If you're trying to make a number on a dyno one time, obviously compounds are great for everything. But if you want to stick to a single, I feel like you need to, your best bet is to go in the S300, the S300 series or whatever you want to call it. Get like a 362 or something like that. They don't spool well. You're losing a lot of RPM range on your VE because you don't have that high RPM performance, so you can't really utilize the 4,000 RPM capability of an S300. Now you're just made it so it spools slower, but now you're still got the same 3,000 RPM cap.
So why wouldn't you go 67? The HE?
Because just all of our dyno testing shows that the S300 is capable of moving more air at that 2,500 RPM range. So you're kind of losing RPM band, but if you're trying to just hit a number on a dyno, you don't care if you take a hit of spool, cool. Now, if you're looking for just an all-around great truck that's going to be fun to drive, I'll take a 30-horse hit all day long and run a 351 or something like that. Faster spool up. Yeah, you're not going to have that 30 horse when you get into it, but it's going to drive a lot better on the street. That's my thought. That's what I've seen a lot of people do, and it seems to work well.
The final thing we kind of touched on turbos there is the fuel system. Factory lift pump won't keep up at that level. A lot of guys, decide to go with like a electric aftermarket where they can regulate and turn the pressure down. I've seen some guys get some trick setups where they have a boost referenced regulator where it cranks the fuel pressure just as they get into high boost, because you can kind of blow out the little front seal on the pump if you get too much pressure in there. And so generally most people like to keep it under like 18 PSI. Some say 15, most say over 25 is like playing with it. But to get the most out of them, if you jack up the feed pressure, you'll get a little bit more power out of them, especially a little more RPM range. But at the same time, all the time, it seems like it's a leak problem. So you got to get creative with that. I've heard some guys mess with that. Anyway, there's a little KSB mod there, a little starting module they can mess with. It kind of gives them a little bit of timing on a switch, and this is all streetability stuff. But long story short, I don't believe 500 horsepower is really in the future of a VE unless you go right to a P-pump swap. You go to P-pump swap, any P-pump, I don't care if it's a 160, whatever, you're going to have enough fuel. You're going to go smaller in the injectors because you want it cleaner. Those big injectors sometimes hurt horsepower in that lower power range. And where do you think you'd put timing there for like a hot street? Maybe 20 degrees, 22 degrees?
18 to 22, somewhere depending on what you want to do with it.
If you P-pump swapped it and towing setup, still 16 to 18 is going to be fine. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to get crazy to make 500.
Yeah, so that kind of moves us into the second gen guys, right? Like, kind of covered a lot of stuff right there. P-pumps. You talked about, doesn't matter which P-pump you get. So depending on what year truck you have different.
So we're talking now 94 to 98 Dodge 12 valve.
Yep.
The P-pump or the dinosaurs or whatever you want to call them. The Vindy.
Yes. And so you kind of have, is it 3 kind of basic models? I think there's more, but 3 is one, the 160, the 180, and the 215. Mm-hmm. I hear about the 175.
175 is just a different calibration on the 160. All the hard parts
it's a
are
160.
the same. Yeah.
It's just the manual transmission, 94, 95. But yeah, it's basically just a 160 with a little bit different plate in it.
Yeah.
And so let's start with the early ones. This is kind of your specialty because you went with the junker. You kind of like maxed out what a 160 could do.
So you're starting out at 160. Generally on the dyno, I don't know if they're factory freaks. They usually make more like 140. From what I've seen on mine. We've dynoed a few of them. Have you seen any down in the 120s or 130s stock?
I haven't, no.
So I don't know if they're understated or if the governor plate wears over time. And so it's allowing a little bit more fuel after they get miles on them. But, it seems like you're starting just a little bit higher. Right away, I would go right to, let's address the head first. You still have the same head gasket problems. So you either need to do head studs one at a time, or
you want to start this off because we mentioned like good towing horsepower, and we mentioned just like a crude will make 500 horsepower on the dyno. So let's start this off with like the cheap route. Like if you just want the bare minimum to get to 500 horse.
So let's start the transmission, bare minimum 500. Is that
stock's not going to do it.
So a pan-off upgrade, does that get you
we
there?
We actually skipped that on first gens too. Same problems.
Swap the trans to a 47 RH.
But what do you need? Like if you're trying to do this as affordably as possible, you just want to go hit, ride around with your buddies.
So with an automatic as cheap as possible, you're going to need a torque converter. So you're going to have to pull the transmission, at least slide it back to put in a better, like a triple disc torque converter or a really expensive billet single disc, which to me is like, you might as well put a cheap triple in because they're the same price.
And they're way better.
That's why we don't make a billet single disc. I mean, we sell them, but we don't personally make them. So you're going to need to do that. You're going to need a little more pressure in the transmission to make the rest of the clutches hold if it's healthy, with a valve body, which is going to raise the pressure and tighten up the shifts. And the torque converter, you can get to 500. Generally, you're walking on thin ice with the factory flex plate cracking and the factory input shaft. And shortly after that, you're going to start, losing clutches and things like that because your second gear shift timing's not great with the factory components. So you're going to start slipping the second gear band, and then you put more wear in third gear, it makes debris. And so it's kind of downhill from there. So even if you start with a stock healthy transmission at 500, you get a little while, but
so your bare minimum for an automatic would be like basically a pan off kit and at least like a triple disc converter. I mean, you can do a billet single like you're saying, but it won't hold 500 for
triple disc. And while you're there, you'd be stupid not to put a good flex plate in there because they're not very much money. And the stock ones,
you're right there.
The stock ones, 50% of the time rip out before the stock input shaft, and 50% of the time the stock input shaft breaks first. And the flex plate's still cracked. So just put a flex plate in there while you're there.
Okay. And then on a manual transmission, really, you just need a good clutch, either an aggressive single disc or a dual disc. I'm a big fan of dual discs because they just drive so nice and they hold good power. But
so back in the day, I played a little bit with, there's like so factory clutch is like a 12 or 12 and a quarter inch or whatever. They have that 13-inch upgrade that's kind of like the NV5600. You can do that with the same standard 1.25 inch input shaft, but you can get like that brass woven organic, higher plate load. And they'll hold 500 horse.
So I'm be on the other end of that. That's what I put in my truck. And I live in Missouri, sea level. I loved my torque. I used every little bit of it. I bet that truck made 350 horse as I burned it up.
Like, but how much torque are you making?
Oh, outrageous. Probably at least 1,000 foot-pounds.
Yeah, and that clutch. I think clutch is only rated for like 875 or 900. Yeah,
900.
So it kind of depends on your RPM rate. So if you're making a lot of torque. And really, clutches are rated on torque. They just give horsepower to make consumers, hopefully make better decisions when they're buying the clutch. But yeah, so really, you should be getting the half organic, half ceramic or ceramic or Kevlar or whatever. They have all kinds of different options there, so you get a little bit more aggressive lining. But you're on the ragged edge if you have a Meyer truck. So.
Yeah, really the better play is to go to dual disc. If you're on 500-600 and you ever want to use it well.
And I was like, that was my first clutch. So I was like a young kid and everything, but I really didn't beat on. I mean, I didn't beat on it that much. Like I didn't try to do burnouts or anything. Like it just didn't take it. Like I was just thought it was a hot rod and just didn't take it over time.
See, mine, I tried like 3,800 RPM sidestep in the clutch of the drag strip in second gear. And after 3 launches, then I couldn't shift into gear at idle anymore. But that first pass, 1440, I was like, woohoo!
That's worth $1,000 clutch.
Yeah.
It was not good.
Okay, so that's a cheap route. Let's say, okay, now I want 500 horsepower. I'm going to tow. What do I do trans-wise for a tow? Let's stick with the transmissions before we move on.
So manual transmission, you're going to go to a dual disc. Like that's 500 horse and it can tow.
And you're probably going to put a fat input shaft while you're there. You don't absolutely need it at 500, but you have enough power and torque there. If you
on a big load behind the trailer,
big load, you can break that input shaft. So you might as well just do the fat input while you're there.
And this is like a legit build that you do want to tow with. You should probably ditch that NV4500. I'm a huge hater. They're terrible transmissions. IG50. I was like, you're talking about fat input shaft. And I was like, I never did the fat input shaft. I was like, oh yeah, IG56 swapped it. I did do the fat input shaft.
Which, that's a good play on that. If you get a 6-speed, that's way nicer.
They're so much better to tow with. Like, I couldn't believe how much easier it was just because
they shift better too. If you like to hot rod at all, they're way smoother.
Oh, yeah.
Shifting for racing.
For sure. They're a superior transmission for towing.
If you stay with the NV4500, you definitely need to address the 5th gear nut. And don't be one of those lazy guys that puts one little peen in and thinks it's good. Like you need to weld that sucker on there or get some fully spline main shaft. You need to do something with 5th gear is a problem, especially if you have that much power because you will be in 5th more often and while you're towing and you will rattle that 5th gear loose.
What about on the automatic side? This is a removed transmission?
If you want a solid transmission for towing and everything, use 500 horsepower, not worry about it. You're going through that transmission. You're basically
like a 650 horse tranny that we sell.
That'd be great. Adding clutches. So there's obviously we're starting off with the valve body, bumping those pressures up, the same kind of thing as the pan off, but we're able to go a little bit further because we're putting some of the better parts in there, lever strut anchor, all that stuff. We're adding extra clutches to the direct pack. We're adding extra clutches to the overdrive pack. We are putting a better second gear band in there.
A higher ratio lever, so you have a little more bind on second gear.
Yep. And then we're doing a billet input shaft, just like going through and just taking care of all those little gremlin problems.
Converter, the flex plate.
Converter. Yep.
Triple disc, billet input, heavy duty flex plate. Deep hands.
This is by far our most popular transmission because it serves a lot of people's needs.
Yeah.
And like we said, it's what's in the junkers at 900 horsepower. So it's fairly well underrated, but if you are towing heavy like that, it's a very capable transmission.
Yeah. No, it's a great transmission. We talk all the time about don't overbuild your truck. I mean, in the wrong ways. And you start getting like an 850, 1,000 horse transmission, the pressures are too much for a stock truck. 650 is just that sweet point where we're not commanding too much to where you could put that transmission in a bone stock truck and it would just survive and love every single day of it.
Yeah, so that's a really good option. So now that we got the transmission covered, anything differential drive shafts, like there's the standard,
500 horse, yeah,
no big deal.
I just make sure the diff's full of fluid and
transfer
then
case
serviced
does need
once in the
oil
last
for that.
100,000.
Make sure your joints are good, all that kind of.
Yeah,
These are older
just
trucks,
the
the second
basics.
gens, just basic maintenance on this one.
Yeah.
Now let's go engine wise. Okay, so let's start with the fuel. They started like 160 horsepower to the crank. You're like a 140-ish to the ground. How do we get to 500 to 600 horsepower?
So your affordable way on the fuel side, you got to take care of the lift pump right away. So that hot rod lift pump is a great option for 500 horse because it's a factory modified pump, fits, it's bolt on. You don't need to change anything and you'll have the fuel you need.
Yeah.
Some guys like to go like electric pumps
the problem with electric pumps, and I'm sure this is something we talked about before, but the problem with electric pumps is 12 valves love pressure. And in order to get electric pump to make pressure, it has to work that motor really hard all the time. Common rail guys have great luck with electric pumps because they're making 12 PSI. And that electric motor can do that all day long. It's not a problem. You start asking an electric motor to make 45, 60, whatever PSI all the time, you're working it really hard. You're not going to get the service life out of that electric pump, at least especially not like the pumps of 5 years ago.
Now there's this new AirDog 5G we've been playing with. They have a boost referenced regulator on them. So you can run them at, let's say 25 PSI.
Yeah. And that is cool.
Which isn't going to last as long as a common rail at 12, but it's a lot better than running at 40 or 45. And then when your power comes in and the boost rises, then it'll ramp in. But truth be told, it's still not going to last as long as a mechanical lift pump.
And it's more expensive. And so like when you start talking about the real big power where you get out of the range of what a hot rod lift pump can support, then explore your ideas, whether you want a 5G AirDog or a Predator, whatever it is. There's a couple of good options out there. But for your sub 600 horsepower area, that hot rod lift pump services it so well. It's cheaper. It's reliable. I mean, you're gonna get the same 300,000 miles that you got out of your first one. Like it's a really solid slam dunk. Like for anything less than 600 horsepower, I don't think I'd ever consider anything else.
Yeah, it works so good. And it's so easy. Like plug and play, pull it out, put a new one in. Very easy for the home guy to do that.
Now, moving on to the injection pump for fueling, the factory fuel plate's going to limit you there. You really should go right to an AFC Live so that you can calibrate the fuel and tune that in. At 500 horse, you have enough fuel that if it's tuned poorly, it's going to be a smoky mess. And if it's tuned well, it's going to be a clean, awesome, snappy truck. So definitely going to want an AFC Live in there. While you're there, it depends on the model of your pump. A 160 pump, you're going to need some help to get to 500 in most cases. So you're definitely going to need to upgrade the injectors. I'd go like to a PowerJet Stage 2 is a really nice injector in there. Our new power-driven 5x12 and the 5x14s, either one's fine. If I did the 5x12, I'd probably run a little more aggressive delivery valve in that combo, probably like the 025 if I was, maybe even 025. And then if I was running the 5x14, you could go with the smaller delivery valve, but I don't know. It's just, you're kind of splitting hairs there. Both injectors will do the job. Kind of depends if you have future upgrades or not. If not, I'd stay right with that 5x12 or that PowerJet Stage 2. The Stage 1 will get there, but I don't know. What do you think? Think Stage 1's plenty or 500?
I think it would. I think it would. I don't know if we've done that testing yet, but I think it would. But you're on a 160 pump. If you have any kind of plans to grow, I would just go to a Stage 2. They still run really clean. There are really not many side effects to it. So I'd probably do a Stage 2 just to be safe. And that way you can just pull back fuel with either AFC Live or the plate or whatever you want to do.
The other big thing you're going to need to do in the pump is the governor springs. I don't know if you guys saw, there's a YouTube video that dark iron diesel guy just did, and he put governor springs. He's like, holy crap. His 12 valve went from like 300 to 500 horse. Now he had all these fueling mods, but it was defueling in a big turbo.
What was the power number? I actually didn't watch the video.
I think he got to 503
from
like 320 or something. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, governor springs are huge.
But it had big DDP injectors and delivery valves, and it had a 369. It was making 300 horse. Put governor springs in there and boom.
Yeah.
He already had timing in there.
A lot of people, some people are hater on governor springs. Like you'll see like, oh, you don't need governor springs. You don't need to rev to 4,000 RPM. It's more than that. Like, first of all, some pumps, like a 215 pump, some fluke ones, like my 215 pump, I put governor springs in and I don't feel like I noticed any single difference below 2,800. Below 2,800, everything felt the same. However, I had another truck. It was a 180 pump. It was a 97 auto. and that thing defueled at like 2100 RPM. And
by defuel, it's not a hard governor there. It just starts pulling
fuel. And I could rev it to, like, people are like, well, how, if you just, free rev it in neutral, how high will it go? I'm like, it goes to 3,500, no problem. But like, it just starts to pull fuel out at like 21 or 22. And
so it's like you almost have 90% of your throttle pedal at 2,100. You only have 50% at 2,500.
Oh yeah.
Even though you still feel the full pedal, it's as if you're lifting halfway off the throttle.
Yeah. And so like your mileage will vary, but a governor spring is a great option. I would do it to any 12 valve I owned, just because it makes the pedal feel like more responsive. Like, we put some governor springs in a coworker's truck. He started here. He didn't have any plans on messing with anything. And within a month, he was like asking for go fast goodies. And we put governor springs in his pump. It's like, dude, it feels like the throttle actually does something now. Like that was his explanation of how it felt. I'm like, yeah, the governor springs are awesome. It makes the truck feel so much lighter. So definitely do governor springs.
Yes.
So about governor springs there.
What about like, you talked about the lift pump and be able to help make pressure. You have to, how do you make pressure with one of these? Because the stock overflow valve is not going to do it. I mean, the torque tech is kind of a big deal. Is that still a play in something at this level?
I mean, it's a valid, I mean, there's guys that have their home mods to modify the factory one, but if you don't want to play, spring wizard and spend hours tweaking your pump to save $40 or maybe it's 50 now, buy the $50 torque tech overflow valve. And we sell those. We sell a lot of them. They're
just make
quality.
Sure you get the right one. There's a couple different options there. Some for electric pumps, some for mechanical. You just want the mechanical lift pump one. I think there's a steady one that has like the ball press in the top, and it's whatever you get, or you go for the adjustable. The adjustable is nice because then you can, tweak it to whatever pressure you want.
So that's going to pretty much take care of your feeling side.
Because the 160 definitely is going to need the pressure to make it there. You're going to need some, and then, like I said, the governor spring or the delivery valves it's going to need it on a 160 or 175. Most guys just go right for an 025, but if you're towing, I would probably do the 055 because it'll be cooler. EGT, the 025s have a little bit better throttle response, a little bit more hot street, I would say. And the 055 is a little bit more tow friendly, a little more don't blow smoke on your cattle behind you, type thing. Not the 025s are smoky, they just are more so than the 055.
So at this point, feeling wise, it's the same hot street versus towing. You really haven't differentiated because you kind of need to make the power both ways. The feeling's got to be there either way.
Same lift pump, same governor springs, same.
I mean, you might be able to get there with full cut delivery valves and stock injectors. But that wouldn't be hot street. That would be like hot 15-year-old that's doesn't have his license.
Yeah.
Runs but
I feel like the only way we differentiate now is if you're just trying to make 500 horsepower on dyno, you just go to 025 because you want that extra fuel. If you can get to 550, heck yeah, even better. Whereas if you were a tow truck where you just wanted to have good manners, you wouldn't care if you lost 20 horsepower with an 055 or whatever that number is. Like, go for it. It's going to be cleaner. Probably get a little bit better mileage, that type thing.
Yeah.
So that's probably the only way we've differentiated this thus far.
Yeah. So
got to get some timing in the motor too.
Yep.
So the stock timing's too low. So that power driven timing kit's really nice and easy. You can set your timing at home, little magnetic degree wheel, gear puller in there. I tell people, so stock's going to be 12 and a half to 13 and a half, 14 degrees, depending on the pump model. For a street truck, since you're not like a big, heavy, there's a guy asked us with an F800, what kind of timing, and I recommend a lower timing for that. But for a street truck, I'd say 18 degrees is pretty common. If it was more of a hot street, I'd probably be more like 18 to 20. In the tow truck, I'd probably be 16 to 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when timing comes, usually a little bit more engine noise. And so if you're towing, you might want a little bit quieter or something like that. Also, startup manners, a little bit lower timing starts a little easier.
Yep, spool up, torque, all that. Also, you're towing, you don't want to be 500 miles from home with a blown head gasket.
No.
So
yeah, blown head gaskets, timing and blown head gaskets go hand in hand.
I remember I was doing some testing back in my Missouri days, and I mobbed it. I had it at 16 degrees, and I mobbed the crap out of it. I put it at 18. First time, blew the gasket out. I hardly made it 4 miles from home. Like, I let it warm up, and then I did my rip to see what it would do. And yeah, blown head gasket, had to make it home. And then I got to power driven, and I mobbed that for a while, compounds, all that. Will Terry said, hey, if you bump that timing, you'll make more power. So I bumped up to 24, First rip, blew the head gasket. So yeah, no, it's more time.
It did make more power, didn't it?
It sure did. And
I wasn't lying.
Didn't replace the head gasket, went to a dyno event, towed someone there, towed someone else back. Didn't win.
So it was mildly blown.
It only blew, like, if you tried to make power below like 2200, 2400, whatever it was, yeah, it would pop. But as long as you kept the RPMs up, you were fine.
So let's talk about cheap and reliable on sealing the head gasket. So the cheap hot street head studs one at a time,
or head bolts,
or actually head bolts will do it.
That's your cheap way.
Your cheap way is power driven head bolts one at a time, because you're getting the torque up there, and if that's a good settled gasket with a single turbo, it'll hold 500. We've tested it.
That's where, like, a lot of people, I mean, you start getting factory components that are 30 years old now. Like, there's going to be some variability there, but a lot of people don't realize that factory gasket is super crushed, and it's going to hold on there much better than a new one. Like, if you had a factory gasket and you retorqued it and then you mobbed it for 5 years and it finally blew, don't think that you're going to replace the gasket, put the same bolts in, and then go another 5 years. Like, the factory, a new gasket, like, think about it. You had to scrape the old gasket off. It's stuck there. It really wants to stay. When you put a brand new gasket on, it's not stuck. Hasn't been crushed for the last 30 years. Like, if you made it for a while with just a retorque or whatever on your bolts, like, you need to up your game if you go and have to do it again.
So here's my junker tie-in. So when I had the junker at 500 horse with the old gasket, it held, and I just had factory head bolts, and I torqued them basically till once they got more than like a half a turn going up in a 5 foot pound increment.
Once righty loosey became a thing, you just like
once righty loosey became a thing, that's where you stopped. Anyway, and I went, and finally I blew the head gasket, a little over 500 horsepower, probably 550 or so. And I was like, I know. I bought myself a new gasket from AutoZone, like a Fel Pro, put it on there. I don't even think it made it like 2 or 3 drag strip runs, and it blew again. And I'm like, what the heck, the old one? So everybody falls victim to that. Well, if the old one lasted 20 years, the new one, I'll just go back the same way. No, you need to up your game if you blow the head gasket.
So the inexpensive way is the head bolts. If you're going to be, like, again, towing, you're far away from home, you don't want to blow the head gasket, you're probably looking more to head studs, possibly even O-rings. Because to tow with 500 horsepower, you're gonna want O-rings. Honestly, O-rings is probably where I'd be.
You're looking to be reliable at 500, where you just don't have to worry about it anymore. Yeah, studs and O-rings.
And at that point, you might as well throw on the towing head, because everything's gonna work better. I mean, honestly, you don't need it, but everything will be easier. Your life will be easier. So
I think part of that too depends on how hard is it to get O-rings cut into your old head. If the local machine shop can't do it, or they aren't competent to do it because they don't do it day in, day out like we do, where they mess it up, bad O-rings seal worse than no O-rings. So, but like I said, if somebody can do that for you for $500 or something, and
refresh the head
and put the valve springs in for you, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. If you're doing this for towing, there's a reason we made this head for towing. It does make a difference. So I'd say if I want to tow trailers at 500 horsepower, I like a towing head, and I like O-rings, and I like good head studs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've got the head held down. Now you've got valve springs. When you're towing, most guys have exhaust brakes. Maybe if you don't have an exhaust brake, you're kind of letting the RPMs go up to slow you down a hill. You're going to want valve springs in there. So the 60-pound valve springs with 10-degree locks, that's a great option. Street conicals, I don't know, why would you want the street conicals?
If you upgraded a camshaft, you need a little bit more lift.
Yeah, if you do more lift, So if you're a cams in your future, go right to the street conicals. A lot of people don't know, but most of the 60-pound springs on the market go to coil bind with most of the aftermarket cams on the market. Like our budget builder cam, that one is fine with 60-pound springs, but any of the Colt or Hamilton stuff
like
is
toe cams from like Colt and Hamilton. Like
they're big enough that you've got to check, and 9 times out of 10 that I've checked them, they're at coil bind. And really, you should be 50 thousandths from coil bind is like manufacturer's recommendations, not at coil bind, or 30 thousandths past coil bind, like the last broken spring I saw from a guy. And he's like, I don't know why it broke. It was just a Hamilton towing cam. And I'm like, what does it lift? I don't know. I was like, well, here's the specs. Here's the rocker ratio.
Yeah.
Here's the installed height in your head.
It's going to break.
Get coil bound.
Yeah. Yeah. And so depending on what you're going to do with the camshaft, pick your springs wisely. If you're this deep and you want to tow 500 horsepower, Push rods are probably a good idea because you're going to have a lot of cylinder torque because when you're towing at 500 horsepower, you're not doing it at 3,500 RPM. You're doing about 2,200 RPM. And so you have a lot of cylinder torque there. So that exhaust push rod has a pretty heavy load opening that valve into that exhaust environment, that high pressure cylinder. So I like valve springs.
And you're going to do the intake ones while you're there because you get them in sets of 12.
Yeah.
I'll push rods in sets of 6.
So just do a set of push rods if you want to tow with this and have it be ultra reliable for sure. Now we're kind of on to we've got the head on, the air's flowing through, the exhaust manifolds. Those stock ones crack.
So the hot street cheap guy, he can get by with the stock manifold till he can't.
Yep.
I know you ported your factory manifold, didn't you?
Absolutely did.
Yeah, I did the same. But then it cracked.
And it cracked his head along with it.
And my head too. But hey,
you did it though.
Hey, I saved $300 or $400 or $500 for a couple months, and then it cost me several $1,000s. So.
Yeah. So an exhaust manifold, I'd say, is in anybody's future. Even the cheap guy, you can get away with it, but it's dumb. If you either way, you're swapping a turbo, so you're cheap or not. So do the manifold while you're there. The most economical way is one of our 3-piece manifolds, and that's very good. And then you start going up to like steed speeds, and those are also awesome. But definitely, I think a manifold is a pretty smart play and pretty dumb if you skip it, either street or towing.
Yeah.
So let's talk turbos. On the street turbos, we're going to be a single turbo because that's you can make it easy, single turbo. You can drive. You can even pull trailers with it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So 500 horse, you're going right for the K27, right?
No, not for 500.
Why not?
That's my 400 horsepower go-to. My 500 horsepower go-to is going to be the 6064, which is a drop-in replacement for the HX35. Super easy.
The reason I ask that is we get that question all the time.
Oh, really?
The K27 is not a 500 horsepower turbo.
No.
But the Aggressor 6064 is.
Yep. It flows more turbine and compressor. So that works a lot better. And then our new Aggressor 9s, the 60-7 or the 62-7 would both handle that very well. And so...
-9, right?
Yeah. So that indicates a 9-centimeter housing. All of our Aggressor, of this new model, has the same turbine wheel. It's a 76 by 67 turbine wheel. So since they all have the same turbine wheel, we're just kind of letting you know this is special. Like our 6064, the 64 designates a turbine wheel size. Since all of them the same turbine wheel, we're just saying this is a 9-centimeter housing. So you kind of know this is a HE51 style housing. So it's a 60 millimeter with a 9-centimeter housing, or 62 or 67 millimeter with that 9-centimeter housing. So kind of different terms for this turbo, but we've been talking about this for months trying to figure out how to let people know what the heck they're getting out of this in a simple way. Hopefully this is a good way.
I witnessed compressor covers coming off the Haas today. They are being machined as we speak.
Yeah, they're really good. And so those would be my turbos for the 500 horsepower crowd. Either if you want to have a easy drop in, like most simple, and the 6064 is a less expensive turbocharger. And so for your street guys, that may be your cheaper guys, or your economical guys, that's probably a better play. You have to do you do have to do an HX40 downpipe with the bigger one because it has an HX40 outlet. So there's a few more upgrades you'll need with that Aggressor 9. And those are my two probably families I do for the 500 horsepower. Also, that S300, that 6265, honestly, that's a pretty stout play. That's a pretty good play.
It definitely, if you're going for 500, having a better spooling charger is probably the win. But if you want room to grow, that's not a bad option. It drives really nice too.
Yeah, that 0.70 housing when you change that turbo.
Haven't we taken that about 550 or so? And 540?
We've done 550 on
550 with it. So.
And we were fuel limited at that. We didn't even take it to max the turbo. That's what we thought. That's when
I don't remember the exact numbers. I know on my truck I made 550, but that was a lot of fuel, but not a lot of engine mods. So it's kind of a weird combo.
So anyway, that's probably a fair number of 550. You may crack 600 with it, but 550 is probably a bit more realistic. So that's a turbo I like for a pretty good daily driver all around. Still tow, still work. Not going to tow 500 horsepower up a hill with it, but you can definitely tow with it just fine.
Really, any single charger, you're not going to sustain 500 horse up a grade. Really, I don't know. Either you're so big that it has terrible manners, or it's so small or reasonably sized that it just not going to have EGT control at 500 horse.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we didn't really talk about at 500. You can get away with the factory engine. You're going to have to get in there and do the killer dowel pin if it's not done.
Oh, that's true.
Because that will drop. So that's in that front timing cover. While I was in there, if I was the hot street guy that's going to be turning some RPM or might be growing, and I've had the cam gear walk before, at like 600 horse.
Mm-hmm.
And my cheap mod was to reach in there with the old MIG welder and put a little tack on the end of
A little flux core action.
Little flux core on the end of the
Oh, boy.
because it's an oily mess. So it doesn't matter what welding operation you have. It's going to be a spatter ugly thing. It's a big job to change a cam. I've seen guys try to like drill and tap the factory cam in place successfully, and people have done it. At 500, it's not really needed. At 600, I personally had the cam gear walk. Now the cam gear is loaded hard by the injection pump. So if you're making, turn a low RPM and run the injection pump hard, you can start walking the cam gear off. So once again, I'm out of the 500 realm here, but if you're one of those hot street guys that knows you're going more, you might be thinking while you're doing that killer Alpin, maybe I should swap the cam or something.
I mean, I feel like
tack it or something.
If it were me, I would just be taking it in place, because trying to drill and tap it, that sounds like shavings in your motor. Trying to use a flux core welder sounds like slag in your motor.
How many DIY guys have a TIG welder at home?
Dude, someone's got a friend somewhere. Like there's got to be better options than your Harbor Freight flux core.
You can buy Harbor Freight flux core for $125 every day of the week.
Oh my gosh. I tell you what, you tape it off well enough, I'm sure it's a great option.
A little scary, but yeah. So
you just put the ground clamp on the cam gear.
Yeah, so don't arc through your journals.
Yeah, for sure.
You gotta be smart. If you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be smart.
Hey, my daily driver that was making upwards of 600 plus horsepower, it had a welded cam, and it held in there over 350,000 miles. So it can be done successfully, and then run another 100,000 afterwards. And guess what? My cam gear never walked.
All right, so that's success there. Now let's move on to the tow guy at 500 horsepower. Let's talk turbos there. And we have our ultimate towing kit.
It kind of goes back to how, like, do you want a single charger or do you want a compounds? Because if you want to make 500 horsepower and you want it to tow well, not at 500, there's single turbos for you. 60, 64, the same turbos we already talked about. They all have great manners. If you want to,
but that's not towing at 500.
If you want to be able to tow, pull a grade, and actually be putting 500 wheel horsepower down on the road, pulling a trailer up a grade, you need compounds, some good flowing set of compounds, keep EGTs in control, get air moving through the motor so it doesn't overheat as easy, like compounds.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I'm actually just thinking to myself here, like we did our ultimate towing compounds, and in that area, we wanted that thing just to work really well. But even those turbos are kind of, I'd say a 500 horsepower, like sustained is kind of like at the upper, and then they'll make more power than that. Mm-hmm. But like to sit at 500 horsepower, that's even a pretty decent task for those guys. I might even go a little bit larger, like the 476 or something. Like I think like a 6064 paired to the 476 would be really sweet.
Yeah,
really sweet. Like the ultimate towing compounds we do currently offer is like it's a K27 or your stock turbo with a 369 Borg Warner. And we did that for like spool up, and we wanted that to fit with the factory automatic transmission heat exchanger, which is on the side of the block. So there's some reasons we chose those turbochargers. But if I'm trying to sit at 500 horsepower for an extended period of time, I'm probably wanting something a little bit bigger. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I don't think that's the right turbo setup for 500 sustained towing, nor do I even think a second gen Cummins is the right platform for 500 sustained towing. So
I will say that turbo system will max out your radiator, so it is very appropriate size for towing.
I wish I had dynoed my dad's truck in the tow tune, because I really feel like I was sustaining 500 horsepower upgrades in the middle of summer towing your truck to that race. I think that happened. I mean,
was that with the 476?
That was.
Or was this after the 480?
Both ways, 472 and then also 480. They both worked really well. I think that, something to think about too is that our speed limits here are 80. We go generally, we go exactly 80. A lot of places speed limits.
It's like racing. There's a plus or minus 10% factor. It's just how it is in every state.
Yeah. But a lot of places, back in Missouri, we were towing at 65, like back roads, 55 miles an hour. Our towing compounds would be awesome for right there, because it's very capable of making torque at 1800 RPM, no problem. They'd probably be my go-to turbo setup if that was what I was doing every day. Now out here, speed limit's 85. We're pulling grades and stuff at 2400 RPM in your second gen with a 354 gear ratio and your 0.69 overdrive. Yeah, if you're trying to sustain 500 horsepower up that 2400 RPM, whatever it is probably a little higher than where those turbos really want to be working at 500 horse.
Yeah. So yeah, just I guess you're right. Depending on what RPM range you're going to be in, if you're in that, California, or well, can't say it's California probably, but if you're somewhere your speed limits are lower, then it actually worked really well there. So, what else is needed? I mean, if a guy wants a truck and hey, everything I need to know. I mean, intercooler upgrades, boot upgrades. If you're doing compounds, your boots.
Boots. I would do boots 100%. I've blown too many boots, single or compound.
Yeah.
To deal with blowing boots on the side of the road.
Air intake, you're going to need.
You'll need that.
Something bigger. If you have the compounds from us, comes with air intake. If it's a single turbo, I mean, you need some airflow in there. You can't. The stock air box won't handle
it's pretty restrictive.
I mean, it might handle it with a high flow filter in there. We haven't tested that yet.
True.
But I know with a factory paper filter, stock box is not enough flow. Even for an Aggressor 6064 at that top limit, 500 horse, starts pulling down, you're going to want some more airflow there. And then the hot street guys, they just let their trucks get dilapidated. Somebody that tows and depends on the truck, they're going to do the fan clutch to make sure that it's cooling well. They're going to service all their fluids, just the normal stuff you do to make sure your truck's solid, ready for that kind of power. And I can't think of anything else.
There's upgraded intercoolers that may or may not make a big difference at that level. I mean, the stock radiator is pretty capable. I'm not sure if the aftermarket ones are really that much better.
I'd love to do that test. Yeah. I have one in mind.
Are we talking radiators or intercoolers?
Both.
I mean, I think you can get some like 4-core radiators and stuff. The problem is the factory one's copper copper, I believe.
Copper, yeah.
And I know they're freaking heavy. And so that dissipates heat really, really well. You get these aftermarket, 4-cores, they're aluminum. And so like there's a little bit of trade-off
plastic
there.
end tanks that are kind of plastics insulating, so they don't even get any cooling from the end tanks.
So yeah, it's I would love to do some testing and see what's the go-to. Like that way I could recommend a radiator solidly, but I don't know. They all seem to work pretty good. Yeah. My dad's, which we were talking about, was a factory.
There you go.
All the trucks I've had towing problems with had aftermarket radiators because the old ones had worn out and leaked.
Well, let's move on to VP44s. This is still second gen, so a lot of the same things apply. Everything we talked about, transmission
all applies. Exactly.
All applies. No change. We're still second gen.
Clutch, the same stuff.
But it comes they came with either 4, 5, or 6 speeds, right? So hopefully you have a 6-speed version.
Mm-hmm. And the 6 speeds came with both the small and big input shafts. So know which one you got, so you can buy the right clutch kit or upgrade whatever if you need to.
Yeah.
And that's basically a 2001 and newer should have the big input, and a 2000 and older, a 2006 speed should have the standard input. But is that the original trans that came in the truck? I mean, let's be honest, these are
long enough. Who knows?
It's like who knows if it's been swapped out of the junkyard when.
All right, so let's hop in the fuel side. Now, obviously, we've now moved to electronic pumps. Electronic controlled, we have variable timing, so that's pretty fun. Mm-hmm. We don't have the fuel capacity of a P pump, but we have plenty for 500 horsepower.
Yeah, solid 500. So starting off with lift pumps.
You're an HO.
Yeah, I guess I don't really know that much about the HOs. I guess you do.
Yeah, this is kind of Will's thing.
There used to be a meme back before the memes were a thing on the forums, and they called it Big Blue Syndrome if you couldn't make over 500 horsepower. Because there's a guy in Texas named Big Blue, and he could never make over 500 in HO. And then because I didn't make 500, but I had an SO, they also called me Big Blue to make fun of me. But of course, my username was Big Blue 24 about too. But what I'm getting at is it was a big deal back in the day. I would say with modern injector technology, some power jet stuff we're testing, you might barely crack 500, but there's a lot of money and resources were wasted in the past trying to break 500 with an HO pump, and they couldn't. Seemed like about 490 is all they would do.
And why? What limits them?
So they don't have as big of pump elements. The plungers are smaller in an HO pump, but the cam is more aggressive. So they kind of have more aggressive injection rate from the cam.
So it might be better at making 300, but isn't as capable at 500.
And because of that, they make a little bit more pressure. And so they respond better to injectors upgrades than the SO, but either one responds well, but the HO responds better to injector upgrades. But they just, with the tuning, you don't unlock as much with a Quadzilla or an Edge, anything with like a hot unlock that's wiretapping. They just don't pumping the stretch or making the duration of the injection vent longer doesn't really help. And so, yeah, they just suck for over 500 horsepower. They're great running otherwise. There's guys with HO, their pump goes out. They put in SO because they're like, I want more power. And they're like, my truck feels sluggish now. So there's a drivability decrease putting an SO in an HO truck with factory tuning down low. But if you want to,
you can tune around that.
Yeah, you can tune around that. And if you use your tuning box and you're doing this pump stretch, they call where it adds duration and stuff. Yeah, the SO, then you can go there. But we should really start with lift pumps because VP44s are known to have lift pump problems.
So what would you do on a bone stock truck? A lift pump. Yeah, definitely a great place to start. And there's a lot of good options, AirDog or Fast. All of them make pumps. I'm a AirDog fan myself, but just deciding how aggressive you want to be and how much power you want to make in the future. Really, I mean, they make like the what do they call it? The Raptor or something. That's a great little bump over stock, or you can get to like the 100 gallon per hour, whatever one. Like you got to just get the pump that's rated for what the power you're wanting to make with it is.
Now, one problem guys had in the past when they did an aftermarket lift pump is they'd have these quarter tank issues. Basically, that aftermarket pump sucks so hard and it has a draw straw that's going down there that the straw would start sucking air when they're at like a quarter tank. And so a lot of guys started going to a sump where you drill a hole in the bottom of the tank and put a sump there. I'm not saying you have to do that because they've kind of not perfected, but they've improved the draw straw. But something to think about if you're there doing it, you might think about putting a sump in your truck.
Yeah. To me, it's like AirDog sump. You do one with the other. Like I'm a huge fan of the sumps. Like draw straws, you got to get them cut just right. And then it's still a possible leak point. Sump, they never fail you.
Yeah.
Unless you're a hardcore off-road in the brush and rock crawler guy, potentially you could hit the sump just right to rip it off. It's what I hear, but I've actually never even seen it happen. But sumps are pretty legit.
Pretty solid.
So got a lift pump figured out now, and that's to keep the VP alive.
That's to keep the VP alive. And then obviously keep in mind what your horsepower goal is. Like it needs to move enough.
So we're kind of in the SO pump world right now because we're talking 500 horsepower. So if you obviously said you can replace your HO with an SO and get the fuel. So what do you need to do?
But HO, if we say the limit is 485, almost all of them will get to 485, close to 500,
which is probably the place. Not so if you have an HO, it's not necessary to swap. I mean 45, you're not going to notice on the street. So either way can be done. Mostly.
Mm-hmm. And then you can ruin the truck and make it a smoky mess trying to get that last 15 horsepower. So just plan on 485 and that'll all be good. You try to go over 500, Karma will smack you with your HO pump and be like, not today.
And so you're talking about the pump stretch, the wire tap and all that stuff. What is that? And is that necessary at this power level?
So you actually have to have the pump stretch. So in the aftermarket, there's tuning boxes that go in and they can program the engine computer. And the injection pump itself has a little computer that limits the fuel. And so you can go in with, there's several things like a Smarty. Quadzilla is the most popular one that we sell. Edge is also very popular. Back in the day, there was TST. There was so many different tuning platforms. But I'd say the two today leading ones are Edge and the Quadzilla. The Quadzilla is a little bit more customizable. Actually, I don't know if Edge has come out with any new upgrades to let you custom tune or not.
They have custom tuning, but what I've seen, they're good at adding fuel. But if you want like nitty gritty customization, Quadzilla is still really nice for that.
Okay.
So basically, it's got to go in there and it's got to command more fuel with the injection pump. So just like on a P pump, when we're putting an AFC Live or components in there, you're not doing actual components on the pump. You are just controlling the programming in the pump. Well, the factory pump has a hard burn chip that won't let it go over, let's just say rough numbers, 350 horsepower, maybe 400 on the high end. To get more, you need more duration than what the factory chip will do. And so a wire tap box taps into the wire that controls the on-off solenoid. And when the factory burned chip in the VP44 pump says no more fuel, that's when the wire pump box hijacks the solenoid. It's like, no, we're going to stay on a little bit longer and then we'll turn off.
Nice.
And so that's all wire tap box is. The reason they're controversial is back in the day, sometimes you could run the pump dry if you had too much pump stretch, as they called it. and then there'd be warranty problems. And so Bosch started saying, hey, if this wire is pierced, this wire that's commonly pierced with this piggyback harness from this injection pump, your warranty's void. And so a lot of people, after they got out of their 1-year warranty, they tap the box, and 9 out of 10, no problems. And 1 out of 10, or maybe it was 1 out of 50, it immediately ruined their pump the first time they used it. So I think it's relatively safe personally, but there are, it's your budget. You decide what you want to do, but most of the pump builders won't warranty them if that wire is tapped, if it's pierced, this control wire.
So now that the pump's taken care of, where do you go for injectors? I mean, how big do you have to go on these things?
I mean, I think these 7x9, these new power driven ones we just came out with are, that seems to be the hot ticket, because you got to realize a VP over 600 is pretty rare. 500 is pretty common. And so you don't need these the biggest injectors out there. 7x9 is going to get you there. It's a great injector. Mm-hmm. A 7x10 will get you a little more power, but you're not going for more power. Yeah. And a 7x8.5 or 7x, it just might not be enough. Yeah. These respond really well to injectors. I've talked to some injector manufacturers, been testing. They've been able to get almost a 500 with just injector with modern injector technology. Not even the pump stretch. Not even the pump stretch.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
They would still need a tuning box because there's boost limited fueling based on there. And if you go over like 30 pounds of boost, the factory computer will pull the fuel back. So, so you have to have some sort of injection pump tuning box on there that's lying to the ECM saying, no, we're not too much boost. Keep giving us fuel.
Yeah. As far as like cylinder head stuff, this is all pretty much the same, but the valve springs are different in this compared to a 12 valve.
Yeah, so these 24 valves, they're designed, what's the red line, Mar? 30?
I think it's the same 3200.
3200 and a 12 valve, the red's actually at 3000. So I would say the hot street guys, you get away with no valve springs. Honestly, lots of guys that are towing because they're not, if you have an automatic, you're not shifting it above 3000. Wouldn't even shift that high. So it's kind of like valve springs are, I'd say optional at that level.
Push rods are the same as a 12 valve. Like I still feel like you're kind of like your hot street guy, probably not necessary. It's not necessary. It's just one of those things that
you'll have slightly better EGT control of the valve springs because you will have better valve train control and the push rods. So if you want that last 10 or 15 horsepower and you want ultimate reliability, put the valve springs and the push rods in there. And if I was doing one, I would do both.
Yeah.
I don't feel like putting a heavier push rod in there with a stock valve spring. It's like, it almost seems like a mismatch to me. Yeah, I'm not saying it's going to cause a problem. It just seems like, man, if you're adding weight to valve train components for high performance, why aren't you increasing spring pressure, commensurate for what you're doing there? So
now same thing with this is the manifold that can still crack, right? Like it's the same basic manifold.
I would say they're more susceptible to cracking.
Really? They're even worse.
They seem thinner, yeah.
The heads don't seem as prone to cracking, but the manifolds definitely are. Or shearing bolts and sticking them in the head is really what normally happens. So you usually shear a bolt or two and crack the manifold eventually.
So still upgrade manifold, still a big deal on these things. Turbo's similar to
copy paste. Yeah. Seems
12 valves.
The same.
They seem to make a little bit more power with that 12 valve head. Like a K27 makes a little bit more power than it would on.
I think you can get a K27 almost to 450 on our dyno with a 24 valve, where a 12 valve, it's like 425, 430.
We did have one 12 valve do kind of better than normal, but it had a cam in it already. So if you cammed up, your numbers will skew higher. But in general, I'd say 400 on a 12 valve and 450 on a 24 valve is pretty solid numbers.
So turbo system, all the same. You're going to need head studs in there. You'll still blow head gasket on those.
O-rings if you're going compounds.
That tuning box lets you adjust the timing. You're going to need to put timing in there to make the power. If it's not a quad cell, it's all the other tuning boxes add timing. So it's like a lot of guys run timing like, I'll just be fine. It's like, you will, but if you pump it up to 500 horsepower with that added timing, you're going to blow the head gasket.
Now, with the limited fueling that these have, we do have a ported head for the 24 valve guys. And obviously, kind of like your VE guys, like if you're limited in fueling, getting all the air you can to the motor is going to be a benefit. So the towing head for the guys who, again, are wanting to put 500 horsepower to the ground, towing your trailer up the hill, I still like a ported head. Just everything we've learned, I'm becoming a bigger and bigger believer in ported heads than I ever was before. Like our results have been really quite eye opening.
And it seems like we get a lot of 24 valve guys that call up with like cracked heads. We never get 12 valve guys call and say their head's cracked. They pull it off. There's cracks, but it's never a problem. It seems like for some reason, 24 valves crack enough to like cause coolant leaks or something. I don't know if it's a different customer and they're having a shop work on it where the 12 valve guys are working on themselves, but I'm amazed how many 24 valve heads are cracked. And so they're looking. So it's like, if you have a high mileage one, I would be looking at potentially getting that. And if you're there, you might as well get the toe ported one because it's not very much more and it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Elsewise, it's a second gen truck. So everything else kind of remains the same. We're moving into like a whole new platform.
We didn't talk about gauges. So 24 valve, you got gauges built in your tune box.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the 12 valve guys. At 500, you should put an EGT, a trans temp, and a pyro in there. Just so you have an eye on, you have enough power and fuel there to burn stuff. So gauges, you should put in anything at 500 horse.
Yeah.
And the VP fuel pressure gauge for sure. You don't want to be running that dry.
And you'll get that with your tuning box, or at least you should opt for that option.
Okay, good. But let's move into common rails now. This is like your 03 and up. This is now a new platform, new engine, all kind of new stuff. Transmission,
I mean, it's a 48 instead of 47, but ultimately it's all the same.
Copy
they had
and
the
paste.
same converter, which is your weak link.
Same flex plate, garbage.
Yep, everything we said for the 47s, same for the 48s. If you want to do 500 horse reliably, you need a triple disc. You need a billet input shaft, pan off kit, or a full build or whatever. So yeah.
Now, this is when they made the big change in the head gasket to the MLS gasket. A lot of things changed here. So this is going to be our shortest segment because it's so easy here.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
What does it take to get to 500 horsepower on an 0307? A tune. Now, if you have like an early automatic that has the 341, it's got a 54 millimeter compressor, you might need to put a little bit better charger on that.
That's a 03, 04. 04 and a half is when you got to the HE350.
What did I say?
You said early 03, but I was like, there's 04s that are sucky
style.
too.
I didn't know that. Anyway, you probably need a charger to get to that 500 horsepower number. But yeah, if you had like a manual truck or an 04 and a half to 07 truck that has a 351, which has the solenoid on that front cover, that'll do 505, 515, even like 525 with just the tune. Like everything bone stock, just the tune.
They really are pretty amazing. The MLS gasket takes a lot more to blow up that head gasket, so it's pretty awesome.
And the custom tuning,
so
they can control timing at different points and kind of keep the gasket alive too. A good tuner can kind of tune around not having head studs, limiting some torque down low. And so there's other cool wizardry that goes on in there.
What's fun about that is like we were talking about a bunch of different things. We were talking about governor springs on a 12 valve. We were talking about bumping your timing. We were talking about all that stuff. And we're like, oh, a common rail, just throw a tune at it. The tune is all those things.
Just electronically controlled.
You're just like electronically bumping
Governor's
your timing.
raised.
Everything. You're adding fuel.
Your Android fuel controls in there. It's all in there.
It's not as simple. It's just easier to offload.
They come with a larger turbo. It's a 60 millimeter compressor where the 12 valve had a 56
factory race turbo. Man, it's a solid unit from the factory. And then you put bigger internals in there. It's even better.
Yeah, and that is kind of interesting. A lot of people have asked us, like, will you sell a 60 millimeter HE51? They came with that. Like, yes, but we upsized the turbine, and that makes a big difference. Like, getting that bigger turbine there really helps.
Yeah, like in diesel stuff, you want the turbine, generally speaking, you want the turbine wheel to be a bit bigger than the compressor wheel. It takes a lot more horsepower on that turbine shaft in order to spin that compressor because we're trying to make way more boost than a gas application would. You're talking about a gas application where it's making 10, 20 pounds or whatever. That's where you get a compressor and turbine that are basically the same size. Well, a factory 351 has a 60 millimeter compressor with a 58 millimeter turbine. So they really mix-matched it, trying to conform to some regulation, standard, whatever. So
They're trying to make EGR work without having to have an EGR cooler. That's what I think. But
They didn't want an EGR valve in there. They did in-cylinder EGR is what it was.
The camshaft and the turbine wheels. Yeah,
Very creative to try to get around that, which is awesome.
Yeah, good job.
Because they made us a factory race turbo. I was begging for a turbine wheel.
So turbine wheel and awesome. Ooh, it's
like
awesome.
Some engineers at Wholeset said, I'm going to give this on to you guys, and I expect you to do the smart thing.
He's like, these dumb rednecks will eventually figure out they can take a turbine wheel from this old HX40 and stuff it in there.
And also
boom.
you have a miracle turbo. They're awesome. So, okay. So the cheap guy's taken care of. Get a tune, you're done.
Yeah.
We still want to get 500 to the ground, go up hills. That still requires more. This is going to require some more upgrades.
I mean, you're hot and smoky with the stock HE351 trying to achieve that. Especially with that lack of turbine wheel in there. So it'll do fine at 2000 RPM, but you start asking for anything at 2600, your EGT control is going to go, through the roof. It's going to be terrible. And so just a 6067 or 6267 is a really good solution to that. It really helps drop your drive pressure, your boost. It just makes it so the truck doesn't have to run as much boost to get the airflow through the motor, which helps with less heat in the intercooler, which means less heat in the radiator. It's just a great combo.
Yeah. Valve springs, similar to 24 valve. If you're going to do push rods, which they still suck in the common rails, you might as well do valve springs while you're there. Head studs.
I think if this is a tow truck and you plan on doing 500 horsepower for a while, just do some head studs. I mean, just like the ARP, 2000s or equivalent, just something to help hold that head down a little bit better would be a great solution. And then your head gasket's solid.
Yeah, that'd be good for a long time.
Back in the day, I went to a dyno contest in Vegas, and there's a guy with a common rail, and he's spraying it, and he hit 1,000. And every time he'd hit the spray, it would lift the head and shoot water out. And then it would settle right back down because his MLS, and then he could go get ready for another day. He did 3 pulls back to back, and each time he'd lift, spray water out of the head, out of the overflow bottle, and then it'd come back. And I'm like, that MLS gasket is amazing. So if you're towing with 500, you might be on the verge of lifting. I mean, the studs are a really good idea at 500 horse for a reliable tow trick. Just do it once, and I mean, they're not that much money.
Yeah, and you don't need the super high, super stainless steel or the
some alloy or whatever.
Like some OptiTorque or like Patriots even would probably be good.
Yeah, the Patriots are fine. I mean, they're very affordable.
Or the Torque Masters or obviously the RP as well. The black ones are good. So I would say, again, if you're really trying to put 500 horsepower to the ground, I like the ported heads. Now you don't need it. We just told you don't have to. And this one is probably the closest one you don't have to. But if you had to, if for some reason you do have to pull that head off, I would upgrade it. If I want 500 to the ground.
I mean, the other thing you're not really addressing there, a big seller, not just by us, but lots of aftermarket companies, is there's freeze plugs under the valve cover on these things. And if you're towing and working hard at 500, there's a lot of twisting and coolant pressure and stuff going on in cycling, and you'll pop those freeze plugs over time, and they're under the valve cover, so it mixes coolant with oil. So the big deal is getting those threaded freeze plugs there. So when you get a ported head from us, I mean, we sell some that aren't ported that also have threaded freeze plugs, but that's the main reliability upgrade that people want on their tow
the valve
rigs.
seats, though.
The valve seats.
The high press valve seats, so you don't drop them. So a factory head is very capable of making 500, and they're the best flowing head out of the lot that we were talking about. 12 valves, VP trucks, common rail factory heads are better flowing than those two, but they also have reliability issues that you're fixing in the aftermarket too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have drop valve seats. I've had valve seats spun. Yeah, I haven't actually dropped one yet, but I've been close.
And I'm at 300,000 miles on my stock head praying every time I go on a trip. But I have a ported tow head ready to go on there. I just need to install the dang thing.
Yeah.
It's actually sitting like 10 feet from here, just waiting for me to spend my precious Saturday to install it.
And so again, though, do you think with one of the modded HE351s, you can sustain 500 horsepower? Or do you still go compounds
No, you're not going to be able to sustain that. No.
Yeah.
Like maybe at the right, like -20 in Alaska type situation, but no, I don't think you can. Just singles, your common rail definitely has the best chance of being able to sustain it, but no, you'd have to go either to a bigger charger where you start losing your drivability and towability, or compounds where it's the best of both worlds.
And so compounds for this would be like, I mean, this one, our towing compounds fit this really well.
Oh, towing compounds are so capable of that goal.
Yeah, because we have a 476 that goes with these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that by itself is 1,000 horsepower charger. So when you're cutting your demands in half, and you can compare that with the stock turbo or maybe one of our modded 351s, either, all of them work great.
Yeah. Yeah. Like EGT issues, like that's what's awesome about compounds is you take your EGT issues and just like throw them out the window. The only thing you have to worry about now is your radiator temps. Like that's it.
And they're bigger on the third gens than they are second gens. You have more, the intercoolers are bigger, the radiators are bigger. So it's a more capable towing truck than the second gens. As much as I love the second gens, the third gens are a more capable towing
They
truck.
have more brakes. The frame is stiffer. The axles are more reliable.
Yeah.
They have better gear ratios most of the time for pulling. Not like 80 in Utah gear ratios, but getting up to 80.
Else. Yeah.
They're better other states where you can't drive 100 with a trailer.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Commonrail is definitely an easier route as far as putting parts on, no question.
Yeah.
But you still kind of need the same things. You need a transmission that's going to hold it.
Yep.
You're going to need the air to flow through it, but the Commonrail can do it on stock injectors.
Yeah.
And injectors are expensive in Commonrail, so that's pretty nice because you're going to spend some money on a Commonrail injector.
Yep. Stock CP3s will do it, no problem too.
Yep.
Do they need a lift pump at 500 or does the factory lift pump keep up usually?
Bone stock 500. I mean, you start trying to get past like 6 or 7, you need to think about, I think I made 700 on my factory lift pump, but that was with compounds and stuff. So like, if you had a fuel only setup, you probably would need, not fuel only single turbo setup. You're not going to burn that fuel as efficiently. You might be at like the 600 horsepower range or something like that.
Now, if you're being ultra reliable towing and you're driving all over the country, questionable fuel stops, would it be worth it to have some sort of extra filtration or something on there?
I think it is
water
good.
Separator.
Yep.
And is there a way to do that without upgrading the lift pump, or is that why most guys are going right to a FAST or an air dog?
The easy option is going to be just do an air dog because that not only has better filtration, but it also gives you that water fuel out separation. I'm sure you can get some just generic filter bases, or maybe there's a kit or something to put extra filtration in there, but I'm not super familiar with anyone.
But if I was driving cross country, stopping at unknown gas stations, man, I would. I mean,
the Commonrail fuel
so
system,
expensive.
it definitely, you have to be a little bit more careful about that. On my personal truck, I have the air dog filtration going into a CAT 2-micron filter. So I really doubled mine up because I have spent a lot of money on injectors on that stupid thing. And so, I'm a big believer in fuel filters on Commonrails.
And you
big
can
time.
buy a lot of lift pumps and filters for the set of one, for the price of one nice set of race injectors.
Yeah.
Yes,
tow truck injectors.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's right.
I'm thinking.
So anyway, well, anything else for the Commonrail guys? I think I don't know. Time is up. We do not have time for your. I'm so shocked, Will. I'm so sorry. We can't get to your.
I was like, what's different on the newer trucks? The 6-speed transmission. Don't make 500 with a tune. Emissions intact.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what else? What else do you need to do for 500? You just put a emissions intact tune and you're there.
There you go. That's
cool.
And a head. Go ahead on there.
Makes it all
because
better.
the head's all full of soot from the EGR. So you need a new head.
And there are bigger turbos, and we have the 63 version, and that's coming out pretty soon. And sorry, I shouldn't say they're coming out more. We have turbos for those coming out as well soon, but we'll have another podcast on those. But the mission stuff is a little bit scarier for sure to really go.
What
after.
about that heater grid nut that falls off?
Oh, that's not good.
You don't need that for 500 horse. Let it fall.
Anyway, we are out of time, guys. That's going to wrap up this episode. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if this is good, if you did enjoy this, we have other platforms. We've talked about doing some Fords and other things as well. So if this was helpful to you, and if you need help with your own build, give us a call here at Power Driven Diesel. Happy to help you. And I think that's going to wrap this episode. So thanks, guys.